particularly comfortable when you hear somebody about to introduce you and mentioning a rat, but I think I've probably got away with it, and I hope I'm not part of that particular analogy. Now, you heard Pat talk a little bit there about rights, and I want to talk about rights because we understand an awful lot of human rights. We understand the right to go about our business not being discriminated against on the basis of our sex, of our age, of our colour. We understand the right to live in peace. We understand the right against violence, but there's some other rights that are brought forward by this campaign against blacklisting, and Pat's talked about one of those. It's about the right to work, because we hear an awful lot from governments about sanctions and about duties when it comes to work. But what about taking action against companies who take away our right to work? And we understand very much that people have the right to vote, that people have the right to stand for election, that people have the right to go about and be active in their communities. But what about our right to organise in the workplace? What about our right to vote in the workplace? And what about our right to organise free and fair and powerful trade unions? And what about the right to know? What about the right to know when somebody is keeping a list insidiously, secretively, unchallengeably about you? What about that right? Who's standing up for that? So when we're talking about blacklisting, we're talking about all of those things. And let us be clear, this is a campaign about our rights, but it's also a campaign about our future. Because we cannot and we will not allow these past crimes to go by without proper compensation and without redress for those who've been victimised. We cannot and we will not allow these companies to retrench, to revert and to reorganise and continue with these practices. We cannot and we will not miss the opportunity to organise ourselves, to strengthen the trade union movement and to ensure that our industrial democracy is to be protected. But finally, comrades, we cannot and we will not allow public contracts paid for by taxpayers' money to be issued to these companies unless they can prove certain things. Firstly, they must prove that they've given over proper compensation. Secondly, they have to prove that they've discontinued all blacklisting. And let's make no mistake, the burden of proof is now on them, it's not on us. And thirdly, they have to commit to supporting free and fair trade unionism in the workplace wherever we seek to organise. The STUC wishes you well in this campaign. You know that we'll support you in this campaign, and together we can win. Thanks very much.
Right, comrades. I'd like to start off with thanking Ian Davison, the Scottish Affairs Committee, Neil Finlay, Scottish MSP, and the STUC for supporting blacklisted workers. And finally, UCAT's Regional Council, who recently, at a meeting on Thursday, agreed to send the financial assistance to George Stratton, who was involved in the hit and run case. So everybody for the work they've done, the work's got to continue and it's still got to go on. The blacklisting scandal is the biggest abuse of human rights in the UK. And let's be clear about it. This is a class issue. Blacklisting and capitalism go hand in hand. Why create a blacklist in the first place? It's about control. It's about maximum company profits and human lives. Making workers submissive and frightened to raise their heads above the parapet of fear of the sack. And throughout construction history, the blacklist and still is about preserving power and profit, and still being used today in Crossrail by these same contractors. And all the big names were at it, major players, 44 of them. And finally, funded by the public purse to build our schools, hospitals and infrastructure and to blacklist workers. And while the companies that have admitted their offence say they're sorry, well, they better explain to me why not one single person has been held to account in any of their companies. It's sickening, it's immoral, and the workers' kids go hungry while their parents are sacked, while they carry out their evil, sinister blacklist. No more comrades. We must achieve change, and already the Scottish Government is fudging the issue, citing little evidence. What a cop-out. If you paid money to the consulting agency, then you're guilty, plain and simple. And every one of them should be barred from contracts until blacklisted workers are compensated in full and are given the right to work, and that trade union reps can defend their rights and safety of their members. The UK government have already manned the barricades with attacks on health and safety regulations. Charges been levied to employment tribunals, making it more difficult for workers to achieve justice. We need to redouble our efforts to achieve change through legislation, because government, this in the private sector where contractors go hand in hand. McAlpine, for example, influential in both arenas. With their director, Alistair McAlpine, who was the treasurer of the Conservative Party during the 1980s. Yes, colleagues, the Conservatives always had their own agenda to keep wages down, prevent increased investment in health and safety systems, and to deny workers dignity and respect in employment. It's still going on today, so our demands are clear. A full public inquiry in Scotland into blacklisting, and that every blacklisted worker is given the opportunity to get back to work, achieving justice in the name of blacklisted workers. And with full compensation paid to every worker who's been blacklisted, today and in the future. Thank you, colleagues.
Thanks very much indeed. I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to be here because tribalism is the enemy of good trade unionism, and what we need to win this campaign is the kind of trade union unity that we've seen today. And that's not just within the industrial wing of the trade union movement, it's in the political wing of the trade union movement as well. I want to begin by asking a couple of questions. And the first question is this: to the Confederation of British Industry, whose motto is the voice of business, what are you doing about this scandal? Those companies are your members, what are you doing about it? My second question, in its centenary year, is to the Chartered Institute for Personnel and Development. What are you doing about it? These are your members who have been administrating this blacklisting scandal. What are you doing about it to your members? This campaign for justice is important. It's not just important because of the material well-being of working people and their lost wages. It's not just important because it's about the kind of economy our members work in. It's important because it's about the kind of society that we all live in. What kind of democratic traditions have we got? What kind of equal and tolerant Scotland is it we live in? Where an entire rank and file leadership from an entire industry can be completely decapitated for 2 generations. These villains think they've got away with it. We've got to make sure they're brought to book. Working class people have been robbed of their livelihoods, but more than that, the paths of their lives have been changed forever. Broken marriages, broken homes. What sort of childhood might their kids have had if they'd been in work? And they will never get those lost years back, and there is no money, no compensation that can make up for that loss. So our job in this movement is clear. In the words of the old trade union banners, justice to each, justice to all, to fight, to struggle, to right the wrong. Keir Hardie himself stood on a platform in the Mid-Lanark by-election, the first Labour and trade union candidate to stand for public election, on a platform of not only bread for the hungry, rest for the weary, he also stood on a platform of hope for the oppressed. And that's our job today, just as it was then, to give hope to these oppressed working men and women that there is a future and we'll fight for justice for them. I want to finish by issuing a couple of challenges in conclusion. We need to say to the Scottish Government, end your silence and make a stand. I've got a letter here from the Cabinet Secretary for Finance, John Swinney, to a Labour MP, Ian Murray. In it he says, the Scottish Government is totally opposed to blacklisting or the compiling of a blacklist. And he goes on to say, the practice of blacklisting has no place in Scotland. Well, to the Scottish Government we say, work with us to totally oppose blacklisting. Work with us to make sure blacklisting has no place in Scotland. And our message to the companies involved in this scandal is simple. The message is this: own up, clean up and pay up. Own up, clean up and pay up. And our message to the movement, our own movement, is this: do now what you do best. As Pat has said, educate, agitate, organise. Because the real division before us isn't the division between Scotland and England, it's the division between those who own the wealth and those through their hard work and endeavour create the wealth. The real division we face, and the challenge that we face in the end, is this: can we organise the people against organised money? If we do organise, if we do campaign, we will be successful, and nothing and no one will stop us.
Thank you very much for inviting me. First of all, can I say it's a great honour to be standing in George Square, where is a history of working class struggle. It's an absolute honour. I also say it's an honour to be asked to speak on behalf of blacklisted workers, because blacklisted workers is part of the working class struggle, and our voice has been ignored for many years. When we said we were blacklisted for being union reps, we were accused of being conspiracy theorists. We were accused of being paranoid, and it didn't really happen. And then we got the files. As Jim said, my file here, if anyone wants to see it, is 30 pages long, 36 pages long. It's got my photograph, my name, my address, my mobile phone number, my national insurance. It's got every job I tried to work on for 10 years. And when I was a union safety rep and I complained about asbestos, or I complained about toilets that overflowed with human excrement, the managers on the building site didn't only sack me, but they photocopied my union rep safety credentials and sent it off to my blacklist file. And then we couldn't work, and it's not just me that couldn't work, it's others that couldn't work. I'd also like to pay tribute to the work that's been done by the Scottish Affairs Select Committee, because when we've said it, they've ignored us. But when the parliamentarians recently published the interim report from the Scottish Affairs Select Committee, and Ian Davidson's going to speak afterwards, the MPs have exposed what these blacklisting companies have done, they've exposed what they've got up to, and they've exposed the invoices that showed that our people couldn't get jobs. Not just one or two of us, but 3,000 of us couldn't get jobs over many, many years on some of the largest projects in the country, including the Olympics and including publicly funded work across Scotland. But most of all, the people who need tribute are those workers who've been prepared to be union reps. Those workers who are standing here today, like Frankie and Stuart from Dundee, who for decades represented workers on construction sites, and because of it they lost their job. Workers like actually Jill, I've only met today, Jill Fisher from Pfizer's. She was an electrician on a job in Pfizer's, lost her job when they had a dispute about rat urine on building sites, about health and safety, lost her job and was sacked because of that. I also want to pay tribute, because people say it's not going on. It's all historic. It happened years ago, but it's still not going on. I'd like to pay tribute to this man here, down the front, Stuart Hume, who was one of the leading members of the rank and file electricians who won the electricians dispute recently. And then afterwards, the company he worked for, Balfour Beatty, did a redundancy process across the entire country and the only person they were going to make redundant was Stuart Hume. We know that blacklisting's still going on because it was going on with Stuart Hume. But what happened with Stuart's case? The workers that he worked with on Grangemouth and on other sites said that they would walk out on strike if Stuart was sacked and the man got his job back. It's not about parliamentarians, it's about workers taking direct action that wins us our jobs. I want to make one thing clear. I do not consider myself a victim. I do not want anyone to feel sorry for me. I'm a trade unionist and I'm proud to be a trade unionist. It's the unity that we brought together collectively that wins better conditions for working people, that brings us better wages, that wins us better health and safety,